Hi guys, this is Poker, coach of the Phoenix Jolts in the Littleroot Lessons Draft League Frame Square Edition. This is the fifth and final match of the group stage of the tournament, so a very important and exciting match here. Both of us already made it into playoffs at this point with the 4-0 record, so I wanted to say congrats to him on that. And then this was the match to see which one of us could go undefeated in our division, which was quite exciting, and I was hoping I could do well here. Unfortunately, he ends up having to use the same team as last week because he wasn't able to make a team in time. So yeah, I also wanted to thank him for that, just for like letting the game go through on time even though he wasn't able to do the team. So now we can just get into game one. He ends up leading Grimmsnarl and Togetic. Here I go for a Volcarona and Skarmory, expecting him to possibly go with Trick Room with his Cofagrigus that he had, but instead he ends up going for a pretty passive lead, so I end up being able to set up with both of my Mons here. Hopefully Grimmsnarl doesn't have any like Thunder Wave or anything like that, but he ends up just going for a Light Screen here, which is okay because I pretty much offset that with the Volcarona. Skarmory also being able to Curse will help against things like a Scolipede in the back, which actually threatens a Volcarona, but given that I can get to probably at least +2 or +3 speed here, I was feeling okay with Volcarona. Yawn goes into Skarmory. Good plan to not go for a Follow Me on his end, but given that the lead is still quite passive on his end, I felt okay with just going for a bit of damage with Heat Wave and then going for a Curse so that I'm not likely to die to a physical attacker in the back. On his end, his Grimmsnarl ends up having Trick. So interesting to see what item he gives us here, and it's actually a full Incense. He sees our Citrus Berry, which is okay. Grimmsnarl does okay damage with the Light Screen, and he ends up getting a free Yawn off on the Volcarona. The reason I went for Heat Wave in that position was that he had another Yawn pressure the second turn, and he could possibly consider doing a switch with the Grimmsnarl maybe, or just double protecting or something. If I Quiver Dance again, I was possibly in danger if he yawns this turn and then double protects with a switch on the next turn, so I just wanted to put a bit of pressure damage-wise on his end. And as long as he doesn't get a free switch here, this is pretty okay. Skarmory being Sleep. This turn I still pressure a lot with the +1 Heat Wave, even though I'm moving last. Grimmsnarl just sets up another screen here. And Togetic goes for a Dazzling Gleam for not too much damage on either Mon. Skarmory actually gets crit, which is okay because I have leftovers on that. So I should be able to mostly heal it, and I burned off the first sleep turn. Grimmsnarl, unfortunately, taking our Citrus means that it's going to be able to heal back up, but with these two on the field, that's okay. I get a bunch of damage into both of them, which should put them soon into KO range from the Max Steel Spike from Dragapult that I have in the back. Even though both of these are asleep, Skarmory is going to end up waking up in the next 2 turns maximum, I believe. So I can just start putting off damage pressure here onto any switch in. Hopefully I wake up if he ends up going for a hard switch. If he doesn't, then it's pretty okay. Both of my Mons are defensively set up, so Scolipede comes out here, which was a very good play on his end because he's going to be able to get a speed boost at the end of the turn. Does a little bit more chip with the Dazzling Gleam. But having the speed boost at the end of the turn means that well, it doesn't really mean anything here because the full Incense on Volcarona, but he could possibly outspeed the Dragapult in the back. I switch out the Volcarona just so I can get an Intimidate, knowing that this thing could possibly have Rock Slide to KO the Volcarona, so I wanted to save it knowing that it was pretty decent into Duraludon in the back. They end up going for a Helping Hand onto the Scolipede, which just goes for an Earthquake, meaning our Skarmory is free to wake up at any point and go for a Brave Bird into the Scolipede, which at +2 attack I think should KO. Oh, Scolipede does get speed boost. So I was right to be worried about that. Just getting Intimidates onto it was okay. I was thinking Togetic most likely expects to wake up and goes for a Follow Me just to redirect the damage, but hopefully Brave Bird should be like a 2-hit KO at that range. Maybe not, but with the Intimidate, we should be in an okay spot. And he ends up going for another Helping Hand, so Helping Hand Superpower into the Volcarona this time. The -1 defense means that Brave Bird should definitely KO at this point. We end up even getting a Fortunate Burn, but since we targeted that slot, this is pretty okay. He obviously wanted to get rid of the Crocodile right away with the Superpower, which was respectable, but since my Skarmory was bound to wake up, I can get a very important knockout onto the Scolipede, which is very threatening of the Volcarona. The Volcarona at this point, since we're moving last, not as useful, but definitely still going to be able to do good damage into the Duraludon that threatens my Dragapult. Out comes the Duraludon. At this point, the Volcarona not really able to do much, so I just go for the special attack drop onto the Duraludon, knowing that it's likely going to stay in. Ends up committing max here. I protect the Skarmory due to the max lightning that is likely to come into that slot, but he ends up smartly going for a max Wormwind onto the Volcarona this turn, taking us very low. Volcarona going down at this point is definitely okay, especially if I can get 2 max moves out of his Duraludon onto the Volcarona. Togetic yawns the Skarmory. The yawn could have definitely been problematic because my most damaging move into the Duraludon is Body Press. So Body Press on the Togetic is going to be 4 times resisted and won't be able to do much. Here I go for a Struggle Bug to get a special attack drop onto the Duraludon. We've seen it isn't Life Orb, so given that I have an Assault Vest Dragapult in the back, we should be able to take an attack relatively well and fire back with our own. I actually end up overthinking and making a misplay, which given that the Duraludon has Stalwart, I'm not going to be able to redirect the attack, so very smartly goes for Max Lightning, knowing that Skarmory wasn't likely to switch out into Crocodile. Maybe I should have thought ahead and made that switch, but either way, he has a lot of potential to possibly get a double KO this turn, so with a Dazzling Gleam that also covers for the potential Crocodile switch in. Though we would have at least survived the turn and been able to protect his last turn of Dynamax, so in hindsight, definitely not the correct play. But now I have the Crocodile and the Dragapult next to each other. I can go for Max Phantasms and just drop the Togetic's defense and drop the Duraludon's defense, which is definitely going to be able to help my Crocodile KO it later. Here, knowing that the only thing in the back was a Grimmsnarl, I was fine with not going for an Airstream to get speed control. I can just protect with Crocodile to stall the last turn of his max. If he max Dragons, that's a good play, but I didn't want to take a ton of damage on the Crocodile. Even if it's attack drop, then the defense boost should pretty much offset it. Or the defense drops on his end. Togetic goes for a Helping Hand here. I felt okay about targeting the Togetic here because if the Togetic survives this turn, it's going to be able to follow me a max move the next turn, so not the best. The Togetic's just actually bulky enough to take it, which is not totally surprising, but I was hoping to be able to get a KO into that slot and then be able to high horsepower the Duraludon later. He has actually Solar Beam on his Duraludon, so Overgrowth going to go into Crocodile. Glad I Protect there because that would have done a ton of damage. Already did a ton of damage through Protect, and without Protect it definitely would have taken the Crocodile down, and I needed the Crocodile to deal with the Grimmsnarl and Duraludon in the end game, which Dragapult could have possibly done, but with the Togetic still out, having another attack is definitely very beneficial with the Crocodile. So I can just go for high horsepower at this point. Even if the Grimmsnarl switches in or anything like that, It's eating up a defense drop and then a high horsepower if it goes in the Duraludon slot, which it does. At this point, Togetic's also shown all of its moves. It does not protect, so I can just go for the Phantasm in that slot safely. If the Grimmsnarl switched into the Togetic slot, then it still would have taken a defense drop, a pretty strong max move even though resisted, and at that low health, then I think there's plenty of damage for the Crocodile and Max Dragon Bolt to be able to sweep it up later, and then I could just most likely Steel Spike that slot and go for high horsepower onto the Duraludon slot. Since if the Duraludon switched in at -2 defense, it definitely would have gone down to a high horsepower assuming I hit. So at this point I can go for Max Phantasm and just go for a KO onto the Duraludon. No need to really waste time here. With the AV and the Max, even if Duraludon protects or anything like that, I get a defense drop, so I assume Phantasm plus Dragon Darts is able to pick up the KO on the next turn either way. I have Assault Vest, so I should be able to take an attack most of the time, especially given that he was not Life Orb. So good games to Wendall game 1, and then we'll go to game 2. Here I end up switching up my lead off of the Skarmory due to the fact that it's so threatened by the Duraludon. And it didn't really seem like he wanted to go Trick Room, it seemed like he wanted to trick something with the full Ensigns, go fast, so. I bring the same back, but with Jolteon over the Skarmory because I wanted to show off what Jolteon said I had this time. And I felt like Volcarona was still able to put in work with Quiver Dance, even if it got tricked, potentially. The Scolipede was definitely going to be a potential issue, but with the Dragapult in the back, it should be able to deal with the Scolipede okay. This time he does commit to Trick Room. This is a situation where potentially having the Skarmory would have been good, but then again, Skarmory, even after cursing, doesn't do a whole lot into the Cofagrigus, so in this position, I just go for a Quiver Dance on the Volcarona, knowing that Grimmsnarl doesn't really have a ton to hit us, and Cofagrigus could be special, could be physical, but I was willing to see later on, after he set up Trick Room, I felt like I would be able to stall this out. Again, the lead was somewhat passive on his end, which is understandable when you want to set up Trick Room, but I felt like Quiver Dancing in that situation, I was always going to be going last anyway, so I could just go ahead and set up the boost, potentially if he has a Duraludon in the back. Then I can just get it on the switch in. And he ends up having Body Press in the Cofagrigus, so doing very good damage on the Jolteon. I was hoping to catch a Duraludon switch in there, or any Trick Room Sleeper out in the back like Appletun or something, but he ends up staying in with the Cofagrigus, which is actually pretty good, because his Cofagrigus is obviously going to go to sleep. Jolteon goes down, but putting the Cofagrigus to sleep here ends up being able to put in a decent amount of work, so now I can go into the Crocodile knowing that I'm safe from a Will-O-Wisp from Cofagrigus, given that it has a guaranteed sleep turn. I can pressure any type of switch in with the Heat Wave, plus the Max Darkness from Crocodile. Crocodile is also immune to any type of Prankster stuff from the Grimmsnarl, which we've already seen it set. The Prankster move was going to be Trick that can actually affect my side, so not screens or anything, but couldn't get tricked onto the Crocodile, so maxing Crocodile is probably my best option here. Although the Crocodile maxes, this is actually a quite potentially scary spot, because if he tricks the Volcarona and then goes for Spirit Breaks onto the Crocodile. It'll be slow under Trick Room, having the full instance taken off of it, and it's going to be able to do quite a bit of damage. So thankfully, he ends up going for a Reflect, which is not the best because Cofagrigus now misses the KO. Honestly, unexpectedly high damage from the Life Orb Crocodile, because I was thinking it would do something more like 70% even without Reflect. So very satisfied with that damage. And then Heat Wave is just going to be able to clean up the Cofagrigus and do a ton of damage in the Grimmsnarl, thankfully. Again, he always has that trick play onto the Volcarona, and my Volcarona does not protect. I felt okay about letting him trick it. Volcarona is still at full health, and I'm always going slow under Trick Room anyway. If he leaves a Volcarona here, then at +2 at the end of Trick Room, then it's definitely going to be outspeeding everything and being able to do a ton of damage. So yeah, in this position, I just go for the +2 Heat Wave and get a Max Quake onto the Duraludon. Very good switch on his end. He ends up going to Togetic to take the Max Quake. So totally wastes one of my max turns, and he has a max in the back. Fully healthy, which is very smart on his end. This turn he does trick the Volcarona, so now speed control is somewhat on his side. However, this is his last turn of Trick Room, and his Trick Room setter is gone, so +2 Heat Wave gonna come out here. Picks up the Grimmsnarl and does decent damage to the Togetic. Very bulky Togetic behind screens, easily able to take attacks from pretty much anything. Now he sends in Duraludon. Very good positioning on his end because I can't go for a Max Quake to raise our special defenses, but I felt like with the Volcarona at +2 special defense, this was always an okay position for me. Especially because the +2 special attack, Heat Waves are going to do a ton of damage in the Duraludon given the connect. And then, assuming there's no crit onto the Volcarona, he should have a pretty difficult time getting rid of it at +2 special defense. Here I just wanted to do some damage onto the Togetic, given this is my last turn of Trick Room, or my last turn of Dynamax. I have a Dragapult in the back, so need to get rid of the Togetic, and then I can go for the Dragon Darts into Duraludon, hopefully on the last turn or second to last turn of his max. Here it feels like as long as I can get a bunch of good damage onto the Duraludon, we should be okay. Smartly goes for a Max Wormwind onto the Volcarona, just in case I max guard or anything like that. Wasn't likely in that position even though we were in Trick Room, but gets a free attack drop onto the Crocodile, so Steel Spike's not going to be able to do too much. And we've already seen that Heat Wave is also taken pretty well by this Togetic, so defense boost also not helping here. Togetic also puts on the pressure of the Yawn and Dazzling Gleam, which is going to be able to do damage onto the Crocodile, not so much the Volcarona, but Volcarona is always vulnerable to crits here because of the full instance. Here I just wanted to stall turns, hoping I can just lower the Duraludon special attack. I felt like I could be able to take any attack from it with the Dragapult with max over and at -1. So the Overgrowth going into the Crocodile doing significantly less this time. Smartly goes for a Yawn onto the Volcarona. Here's Struggle Bug. I was kind of worried about a Heat Wave miss, but doesn't actually pick up the Togetic, which puts me in a pretty difficult spot now. I have to use Crocodile to KO the Togetic, and given that my best move into it is Iron Tail, it's not the most reliable. And Volcarona is always moving last, so it's potentially in danger here, especially if they protect the Togetic, which they actually can't because it's shown their set, so I can pretty safely attack the Togetic here. Unfortunately, again, Togetic's able to barely take the attack. So this Worm 1 KOs a Crocodile. Sadly putting us in a very awkward position because I can't just Dragon Darts with the Dragapult anymore. Now he goes for Dazzling Gleam, potentially considering that the Crocodile might survive the attack. And we very unfortunately miss our Heat Wave onto the Togetic, but it's to be expected with Heat Wave. Volcarona doing very good damage into the Duraludon, as you can see. And as long as we can wake up within the next 2 to 3 turns without getting crit, we should be able to tank the attacks from Duraludon pretty decently. And if we hit Heat Wave, we should be okay, especially given that the Duraludon is at -1 special attack. It's no longer maxed. Won't be able to take any other Heat Wave. So here I'm just gonna go for the Phantom Force onto the Togetic, knowing that it can protect. It's gonna go down to the attack. Even if he KOs my Dragapult on the way down, which Dragapult is actually able to survive, assuming no crit, because of the Assault Vest. Especially given that he's not Life Orb Duraludon here. So Phantom Force comes out. Thankfully ends up Dracoing that slot right away. So we were able to dodge that attack, but he's going to get a free Draco onto that slot the next turn. If he does, he is also at -3 on the Duraludon, so as soon as I get to hit some Heat Waves, then this game is going to be over. Togetic does the only thing it can do here and follow me. Given that it couldn't protect, I always had to target it that turn. If he ends up getting a crit and somehow KOs the Volcarona, then I can Dragon Darts the next turn. At that range, it should be able to KO. Unfortunately, he does get a crit with the Draco Meteor onto the Dragapult as it comes out of the Phantom Force. So that is part of his win con, but he's also at -3, so odds are definitely looking pretty good for the Volcarona to be able to just KO it at some point once it wakes up. And luckily it does this turn, so Heat Wave connects and picks up the Duraludon. So very good games to Wendall. Yeah, I wanted to say thank you again for being pretty understanding with his scheduling and just playing out the match anyway, even though his team wasn't completely ready. So yeah, very good games again. Congrats to Wendall for making the top cut. And yeah, congrats to everyone else who made playoffs as well. We will see you in about 2 weeks for our first playoff match. Thank you for watching.